Howdy, y'all. This is Brown at Brown, and tonight we're going to be talking about the movie The Searchers. The Searchers came out in 1956, and it was directed by John Ford, and it stars John Wayne in one of the absolute best performances of his career. And The Searchers is not only one of the most influential westerns ever made, but it's one of the most influential films ever made, period. You know, directors such as Francis Ford Coppola, John Milius, and George Lucas have gone, and several others, have gone on record to say just how much this film has inspired their work. And you see some of their stuff. I mean, you see things like, Coppola's Apocalypse Now, or Milius's Conan the Barbarian, or George Lucas's Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. I mean, you see those movies, and then you watch The Searchers, and you're like, yeah, they definitely got a lot of ideas from this particular movie. And if you want to talk about something a little more recent, you go to 2015 and you have director S. Craig Zallier's Bone Tomahawk, a very well-made but very disturbing horror western. And I would describe it as, what if someone like Tobe Hooper had directed The Searchers? And so you watch Bone Tomahawk if you got the stomach for it, and then you watch The Searchers, or you watch Searchers first, then Bone Tomahawk, and you're like, yeah, The Searchers, has an influence that's still going strong to this day. And one of the things that, I liked about this movie was, I mean, you see just how wonderful of an actor, John Wayne was. And, he's oftentimes a figure of, endearing parody. I mean, you have people like, Robin Williams who do, wonderful imitations of him, but all in good fun, of course. And so it's easy to sort of, just see John Wayne as, kind of an endearing, tough guy bumpkin, a man's man who, takes, macho, macho sensibility up to 11, but then, you see him in something like The Searchers, or in one of the movies wherein, the creative team's firing on all cylinders. I mean, you have, stuff like The Searchers, The Quiet Man, Rio Bravo, or The Cowboys, or his very last film, The Shootist. And you see, I mean, yeah, John Wayne was a man's man, and he almost always played a tough guy, okay? But he was so good at it, and when he was working with a creative team that rose to the occasion, or a film crew that rose to the occasion, the actors, the directors, and writers, and what have you, I mean, you got some surprisingly nuanced performances. I mean, yeah, still tough guy roles, but very nuanced ones. And The Searchers is definitely one of his absolute best ones. And it's also nice to see a movie that lives up to its reputation, because sometimes what happens is you see a, classic movie and you watch it, and I don't know, maybe, too much time has passed in between when it was made and, when you finally get around to seeing it. And, I don't, or maybe just it's not quite your cup of tea. And maybe you can see, why, yeah, this particular film, has, inspired several other films, or you see why, it was highly acclaimed for the time it came out, but you're looking at it from modern sensibilities and you're like, I mean, yeah, it's, well done and everything, but you kind of, or you're sort of immune to the hype, or the hype fails you, so to speak. But sometimes though, you have a film where, the hype is worth it. It lives up to its hype. And I'm glad to say that The Searchers is a movie that lives up to its hype and its reputation. And I would say that, this is definitely one of the best westerns I've ever seen. And as far as, say, one of the best movies ever made, I mean, I'm not sure. I'd have to think about, okay, where would I put this? I mean, are we talking top 10 or top 20 or 30 or 50? But it's definitely one of the best movies I've ever seen. So Yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. So, the movie kicks off with the character of Ethan Edwards, as played by John Wayne, who's a Confederate Civil War veteran who's coming to spend some time with some family. His brother and his sister-in-law and their children, and basically he's trying to get to a point where he's kind of, you get the idea that he's kind of been on the run in a way, because he was on the losing side of the Civil War, and after the war, it's implied that he did some, less than legal mercenary work to make ends meet, and it's only now that he's finally come home and trying to, have something of a fresh start, albeit with a family that cares about him and he cares about in turn. But things get off to things take a bad turn when Edwards takes part in a hunt for cattle rustlers, because at a certain point, certain figures of authority, this Reverend slash sheriff comes in to their home along with his posse, and basically is needing help to find these cattle rustlers, and namely these Comanche Indian cattle rustlers, because like they're able to find like their war spears and what have you, and you're like, yeah, that's Comanche. And so initially Edwards, Ethan's brother, volunteers for the posse, but Ethan's telling him, no, you better stay here and protect your family. I'll go along with it. And he's actually joined by one other member of the family, a man named Martin Pawley, played by Jeffrey Hunter, who's actually a half-breed. He's part Indian and part white, and this is actually a source of friction for Ethan, because Ethan has an immense hatred for Indians, specifically Comanches, and and so the two of them, they have this uneasy relationship. And of course, the family's trying to smooth things over, say, hey, come on, we're all family here and what have you. And it turns out that Martin it wasn't even one of their own children. He was basically found on the equivalent of a doorstep, and the family took him in and raised him as one of their own. And so Ethan and Martin, they go along with this posse to try and find these Comanche cattle rustlers, and they find out that it's actually a trap, or it was a diversion, because Ethan, he's spent years fighting Indians, and so prior to fighting in the Civil War, he's basically become kind of an expert on Comanche mannerisms and tactics and what have you. And when he's able to put enough together to realize that, hey, they set us up, they wanted us here, and they're like, why? Who do you think's is there anyone protecting the house? Is there anyone protecting the family? Other than my brother? And so that's when they're all like, oh my God, and so at that point, the group splits up. Ethan, and Martin, they make a beeline, for the family home, whereas the rest of the posse elects to continue to try and pick up the trail of the Comanche that stole the cattle and what have you, because they're thinking, okay, surely, yes, this was a diversion, but if we're able to pick up their trail, they can lead us to the whole tribe and what have you. And so they so that's where they split up. And Ethan and Martin, and they make it, you know, to the family homestead, and they find it destroyed. And, you know, much to, you know, their horror, they find that, you know, all the family has been murdered horrifically, and the only one that is unaccounted for was Ethan's niece, Debbie, you know, a little girl. And, you know, he and Martin, they shortly thereafter began a hunt, you know, to, you know, find the Comanche tribe that kidnapped Debbie, and also to find Debbie, you know, because, you know, they're hoping that she's still alive, you know, and they begin a literally years-long hunt, you know, to find her and to, you know, bring this Comanche tribe to justice, you know. But along the way, though, I mean, you see how the two characters, you know, Ethan and Martin, you know, you see how the two of them, you know, sort of grow and develop, you know, as in their own individual ways. But you also see how, you know, they play off of one another, and how eventually there's, you know, something of, you know, genuine respect and camaraderie between them, you know, over this period of time. But, you know, basically, you know, during their search, I mean, they're able to, you know, pick up clues and everything, and, you know, find out, okay, you know, there may have been a, you know, girl fitting your description, you know, that was taken by, you know, by a Comanche tribe led by a war chief named Scar, and a very much feared, you know, chief. And so, at the very least, they have an idea of, you know, who their real enemy is, you know, because they've narrowed it down to, okay, you know, it's not a random Comanche tribe, it's a specific, you know, tribe led by this particular, you know, war chief. And so at that point, you know, plus the fact that, you know, several people they meet throughout their journey over the years, I mean, they're able to, you know, get clues that Debbie may still be alive, but even if she's not, you know, maybe there's a girl that needs to be saved, but they're hoping that it's her. And so, yeah, this was, you know, this type of plot, I mean, it sounds so simple, and it's been done in several, you know, other movies or similar. The plot has, you know, I mean, it's definitely inspired a lot of movies that came after it, as I said at the beginning of this review, you know. And you'd be forgiven for, you know, say, seeing one of the movies that was influenced by The Searchers, and then, you know, just thinking that the plot's simple. But the thing is, you actually watch the movie, though, and I mean, it's anything but simple, really. And it's definitely a product of its time, in the sense of, say, you know, sweeping cinematography, and you know, I guess you could say, take charge, macho protagonist, you know, leading the way, because in terms of Westerns, I mean, that was kind of the way to go at the time, you know. But in this case, though, I mean, you have a character played by John Wayne, the character of Ethan Edwards. I mean, you know, right away, you're kind of playing with fire in the sense of, you know, say, you know, having a character be a Confederate soldier, you know, and have him be the protagonist. Because nowadays, I mean, you probably, you know, have a bunch of people saying, oh, we need to cancel this movie because there's a Confederate who's the main character, and, you know, he's viewed as having some positive qualities and what have you. So, I mean, the thing is, it's like, okay, I mean, this movie, I mean, it's dealing with, you know, certain aspects of history. I mean, the Civil War, I mean, you had, you know, people on two sides, and, you know, you had good people and bad people, but basically you had people who, you know, regardless of what side they were on, you know, came away with some major damage. And so, you kind of, see some of that with the character of Ethan as played by John Wayne. And you see how, an individual who, was already, on a, who already had a vendetta against, the Comanche Native American tribes, you see someone like that, and then you put him, into, an actual war, and you definitely see how that just kind of, amped things up for him and made him, even more of a, I guess you could say, hardened individual, but nonetheless one who, was initially, trying to find, some, measure of peace by, coming home to see his family and what have you. So there was still enough humanity to where it's like, I mean, yeah, he has people that he cares about and what have you, but he also understands just how dangerous, the world is. I mean, not just, his, tunnel vision on, hunting down, Comanche warriors, but also just, how, fighting in the Civil War, basically, showed him just how bad it was in terms of, say, humanity in general. And I liked how you got to see some of that. But you also see how there is something of a rough charisma to his character, and, to a point where, I mean, yeah, he's a vengeful individual, but at times, a likable one too. And we definitely understand his motivations and what have you. And plus, with John Wayne playing him, I mean, you have someone who is, tough yet endearing at the same time. And of course, I mean, you have Jeffrey Hunter, who, went on to play Jesus Christ in the movie, King of Kings. And he also played Captain Pike in, the original Star Trek pilot. But he does a really good job in this, movie as well as, Martin, and it was interesting because, watching him here in this particular movie, I thought that he was, going to be like, okay, they cast him because, he was the handsome pretty boy, at the time, or one of the, handsome pretty boys at the time that all the girls would swoon over. Very handsome guy. But then you see how, I mean, yeah, he's a handsome dude, but he's also a good actor. And, you're thinking that initially he's kind of the load in this particular journey, because, of course, you've got the, racial tension, in regards to, Ethan and how he sees, Martin, but then you also see how, he sort of, underestimates certain things about the journey and traveling and what have you. And so it's like, okay, this guy is going to be the comedic load maybe. But then, of course, when they're on their journey, and it's anything but comedic at times, I mean, you actually see his character, kind of mature. And I thought that Jeffrey Hunter did a good job of showing that, to a point of, say, he goes from someone who's kind of the load and easy to take advantage of to, say, someone who, is able to, he's definitely, turned into a different person, come this journey's end. And, I liked how, you see how, I mean, yes, it's John Wayne basically driving the movie in terms of, say, his character's motivation and everything, but you also see how, Jeffrey Hunter's character as Martin, I mean, how Martin essentially kind of becomes the heart of the movie, because, one of the things that comes up, is that, how whenever the Comanches would lead, a raid on, say, a settlement, of, white families, usually they would, kill, the men folk, or the men and the boys, or, just, or if they didn't take them prisoner, but the women, though, they would basically try and, bring them into their tribe and, kind of brainwash them and, force them to, basically, become one of them, or one of their own. And, once they come across women who had been held prisoner by the Comanche, and you see just how, mentally and emotionally damaged they are, there's like a lot of people saying that, it'd be better if, they were they'd been killed, if they'd been put out of their misery or something like that. And so, Ethan, and Martin are both having to consider the possibility that, Debbie, is, not going to be the girl that they remember. I mean, granted, that's kind of obvious because several years have passed. in the span of this movie and what have you, but they're talking like, say, psychologically, this is not going to be the girl that you came to rescue. This is going to be a different person entirely. And, you basically see just how Ethan's vendetta against the Comanche, basically puts him in the mind of, if we can't rescue her, we're going to kill her, because it's better to, that she die than, go on living as, a brainwashed, member of the Comanche tribe, because of how savage they are and what have you. And with that in mind, when you see, Martin, taking all this in, he's aware of the possibility that she might not be, the family member that he, went to try and rescue anymore, but at the same time, it's like, hey, she's still family, she's still someone I care about. I'm not just going to go and kill her just because, she's not the same person anymore. And so, that definitely becomes a source of tension. And that's what I kind of meant when I said that Martin, as played by Jeffrey Hunter, towards, the climax of the movie, basically becomes the heart of the movie, even though it's Ethan who's driving it. And, and also I liked seeing how, this particular movie, even though it was made in 1956, it didn't shy away from, I guess you could say, the dark side of, human nature, at this point, at this point in time, that the movie took place in. Because, when you see the aftermath of the Comanche raid on, the family homestead, and, you literally see how, it's all destroyed. And thankfully, you don't see, the actual bodies, but, based on, Ethan's, reactions to what he sees, it's enough to be like, okay, yeah, you don't want to see what happened. And they do a really good job of, going with the whole less is more approach. And, there's even a point where, Ethan had found one of the family members, or had gone to try and find one of the family members because they thought that she might still be alive. This isn't Debbie, this is someone else. But he and, Martin and one of the members of the posse who had initially gone with them, they're asking him, like, well, did you find her? And, eventually, it comes out that, yeah, he did find her, but, she was dead, and he, buried her with his own hands, and, left his Confederate cloak as kind of like a, burial shroud. And, he's telling them this, and, the guy who, was with them, was actually, this girl's, boyfriend, or her suitor, as it were. And, he's asking Ethan, well, is she, was she, basically trying to ask, well, was she, tortured, or was she raped and tortured? Except, he doesn't come out and say it, but at that point, Ethan just, turns on him and says, well, what do you want me to do? Draw you a picture? And the way John Wayne just, plays the moment, the intensity of the moment, you're kind of like, damn, and this is 1956? And so basically, without, directly saying it, they're saying a lot in terms of, say, just the amount of brutality that was on hand, in this time period, because the thing is, both in terms of history, Native Americans and, white settlers, I mean, like both, or I guess you could say, white folk from, like the government and what have you, I mean, there was a lot of bad blood and both sides did a lot of bad things to each other. And granted, I mean, you see more of, say, what like the Comanche, did in terms of, say, the bad stuff that they did to white, settlers that they, raided or massacred, but you do see moments though where government forces, had led raids on Indian tribes and, basically massacred all of them, because there is a plot point where they find Ethan and Martin find the aftermath of a federal raid on an Indian tribe, and they find the dead body of this one particular character who joined them for a time, and she was basically an innocent, right? And so even though there's this hatred for the Comanche, within the movie, because of Ethan's, motivation and his perspective, like they see that, like you see, someone like Martin, basically, horrified at the fact that, the federal government had basically led an all-out, massacre, on this tribe that, was innocent, and basically just killed everyone. And so, you definitely see that both sides, had a lot to do with, just, doing bad things to each other. And that's where I think, like, you definitely see, the characters, it definitely adds to the character's growth, because, like, for the character of Ethan, it's nothing new, but for the character of Martin, I mean, he's, the one who's like, we need to do better than this. We can't, match savagery with savagery. Like we can't just, go after, people, because we think just because they happen to look like the ones that we are going after. We can't just, go around, killing, people who have nothing to do with, the mission we're on, who are innocent, things like that. And so I thought it was really, moving, like seeing Martin, basically, become, I guess you could say, a more rounded person, and also, you see how he's, in some respects, he's starting to rub off on Ethan, because, I mean, he still has his vendetta, but he actually comes to respect Martin, as a man, and so even though there's the tension, the racial tension, what with Martin being a half-breed, I mean, he definitely sees that Martin's heart's in the right place, at least, even though he thinks that, he's wrong in a lot of ways. But, and one of the other things about this movie was that, and when they eventually meet Scar, the war chief of the tribe that they're after, there are moments that, show just how much of a mirror, Ethan and Scar are for one another, because they both have this almost, Ahab mentality, of, like racial hatred, because, you have Ethan who has this immense hatred for the Comanche, and then you have, Scar who has an immense hatred for, the white people. And, you basically find out through, lines of dialogue when the two eventually meet, and also through an interpreter, you find out that, Scar's been, on a crusade of revenge, with his tribe, because some of his family, was killed by, white people, and he's basically been on a mission of vengeance ever since. Basically, killing the men, but kidnapping or implicitly raping the women too, or brainwashing them, and because that's definitely something that you see the results of, but and then of course you find out the thing that's driving Ethan's hatred for the Comanche. You find out later on in the movie, you find out that when he was a kid, a tribe of Comanche massacred the majority of his family, and so having to grow up with that as a memory, it definitely left a mark on him. So you definitely see how like the two characters, even though they only interact with each other a few times, those interactions are very much filled with tension, and you definitely see how the two of them are like opposite sides of the same coin in a lot of ways. But and going back to say like how these people grow as characters, whenever they come across say like other family members or friends and what have you, you have some interesting conversations, getting different perspectives about, let's say, like the course that America's taken at this point in time. And you have some characters talking about how maybe how one day the fighting will stop, and because this is after the Civil War, and one day the white people and the Native Americans won't be so dead set on killing each other, but before that day comes, our bodies are going to be added to the pile that those who come after us have to climb over in order to get to that point. And so you have dialogue like that with some of these characters, and it's very sobering, but also true in a lot of ways, because you see how today we have a lot of division, and there's like a lot of tension, but compared to say what things were like back then, in a lot of ways we've made progress, but we've also still got a long way to go. But the point being is like this observation about peace can only come after a lot of death has stretched across the landscape. It's true, and you definitely see that in this movie, like in some of these like conversations that they have with these other characters and what have you. But the only thing I could think of that was kind of a problem in the movie was that there are moments of humor, like levity, and to be sure, like some of the humor is very much effective. Like some of it actually is funny, but some of it also kind of feels out of place at times, because considering how intense the majority of the movie is, the humor at times feels like it's come from another John Wayne movie, like one of his more, I guess you could say, lighthearted westerns, I guess. And so when moments like that happen, for me at least, like I'm not saying it took me out of the movie or anything like that, but it just felt a little bit out of place. And I can't really complain too much, because if you have a movie that's totally devoid of humor, it might be a good movie and it might be compelling, but it's not something that is going to have any joy in it. And so, some of the humor is funny, like, whenever, say, Ethan's, playing a prank on someone, just, because of how ignorant they are about certain, cultural differences and what have you. I mean, some of that was actually pretty funny. I mean, mean, but funny, and it was definitely in character for him. But you do have a love story that comes into play, because you have the character of Laurie, who is played by Vera Mills. Sorry, make sure I spell that. Vera Miles, who was in Psycho, by the way. She was a part of a family that was friends with Ethan and Marty's family, and they come across their home and spend some time there, and you find out that Laurie and Marty had actually had something of a crush on one another, but because of how much time they spent apart, basically, said crush was seldom ever acted on, and things like that. And so, I mean, the love story itself, I mean, isn't so bad, because, I mean, they do, add to, say, the aspects of character development for the characters of Marty and Ethan, but there are moments where, like, the humor, it just feels like it's from another movie, because at one point, you have, this fight between Marty and this other character who, was acting as a suitor, for Laurie, because of how long he had been gone from her. And, you have this, very hilarious fight, mind you. I mean, it's genuinely funny, but the thing is, like I said, it just feels like it came from another movie. And so, once that's all done with, though, and Ethan and Martin, continue on their journey, and when it gets to the climax, and, when you find out what happened to, Debbie after all these years, I mean, that's when, everything just kind of falls into place, and, everything is, all the tension and character development and what have you, it all pays off. And so I'm just going to leave it at that. But also, I was just going to say just how wonderful the scenery looks in this movie. Like the cinematography, it was done by a guy named Winston C. Hock. I hope I'm saying his name right. But he and his crew, though, I mean, the camera work did a wonderful job of, say, capturing the desolation of the West, but also its rugged beauty as well. And also they did a good job of adding to, say, the tension of some of the scenes and the suspense. Because that whole bit about what you don't see being scarier than what you do see, that very much does come into play in some scenes. So so the cinematography was definitely a big part, as well as to why this particular movie was as highly regarded as it was. So you have a great looking movie with well written characters played by wonderful actors. And so I'm gonna go ahead and give The Searchers 5 out of 5 stars. I mean, this was hands down a great movie. And if you're a fan of westerns, or if you're wanting to, or maybe if you're not a fan, but you're wanting to see an example of a genuine classic western, I would definitely recommend checking out The Searchers. And if you're a John Wayne fan, and if you haven't seen this movie yet, you ought to do so. And it's you won't regret it. But so that was The Searchers. 5 stars out of 5. Thank you very much for taking the time to check out my review. You got any questions, comments, please drop a line and let me know. And if you like what you see here, feel free to like and subscribe. So y'all take care. Have a good night. Bye.